So Baruch Hashem, yesterday I started the Shiur with some introductory remarks and I ended the Shiur with some divrei chizuk, but that was only yesterday. So today, b'siyata d'shmaya, we will focus on the sugya and only on the sugya. So the Shiur yesterday was more or less an introduction to Yesod Chiyuv Shoimrim, and today we're talking with a specific halacha, and it is one of the most relevant halachas in DNA Shoyel, which is the sugya of Mesa Machmes Malocha. And that is Daf Tzadik Vav Omed Beis in Bava Metzia, when the Gemara says, even though a Shoyel is Chayev Ba'oinsim, in which he bears no direct responsibility, it was not within his power to prevent damage or loss, Afal Piken, because however, if what he borrowed was damaged or broken by normal usage, which is defined by Chazal, Mesa Machmes Melacha Potor, and Chazal give the svara why he is Potor, 4 words. Lav lo oikeme bekilsei sha'altiho. I did not borrow this object just to keep it in the baidim. I borrowed it to use it, and if it broke in the course of normal usage, then there is no chiyuv. What is actually the svara? We find 2 different approaches between Avos U'Olam, the Ramban, and the Rashba. The Ramban says, obviously, it is reasonable to assume that the mashil is responsible. Because if your car broke down, if your mule got a broken back when we put something on its back, or whatever it is, you obviously were aware of the deficiency. You were aware that this is a sick animal or a broken car. So you should have warned me, you should have told me that you can't put much of a burden on the mule's back. Because it's your animal, it's your kli, it's your driller, it's your car. You should have been aware of the deficiencies and the problems your thing has, and you should have made me aware. And therefore, it is somewhat as a pshia of the mashil, and that is the approach of the Ramban and the Ritva. The Rashba, on the other hand, says, because Mesa Machmes Malocha is common, it is to be expected, then the mashil should have stipulated, I want you to take responsibility even if it's Mesa Machmes Malocha. And if he did not do that stipulation, it is as if he was mevater. Because you know, Lav L'Oikeme Bekilsei She'altio, I borrowed this object to use it, and that is what a shoyel is all about. And therefore, you should have taken into account everything you use in due time will break down. Nothing is forever. Neither are we forever. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu is forever. And therefore, you should have been aware that it might break down. And if you want me to take responsibility, even for Mesa Machmes Malocha, that should have been your stipulation. So these are 2 different approaches between the Ramban and the Rashba. Both of them disagree with the Rambam. And let's have a look what the Rambam says. Perek Aleph, Halacha Aleph, Hilchos Shoyel, page 420. When the Rambam brings the basic halacha of Mesa Machmes Malocha. 420, Hashoyel Klio Beheme V'Kiyoytze Behem, Mishar Metaltelin Mechaveroi V'Ovad, O Nigna, V'Afilu Nenes Oynes Godoil, Kigon Shenishbura Behemu, Nishbis O Mesa Chayev L'Shalom HaKol. Shenema v'chi yishal ish mi imrei eo v'nishbar omeis ba'ola v'nimoy shalem yishalem. B'med dvorim amurim b'shenena sheloi b'shas malacha aval amshul b'heim ha'mechaveru lachlish ba v'meisa kishichoreshes harei ze potor. Aval im meisa koidim shiachresh o achar shechorash o sherocha v'dash then Areza Chayev L'Shalem. So the Rambam clearly says it all depends when it happened and not why it happened. And if it broke down B'Shas Melacha, Potur. So both the Rashba and the Ramban say this Rambam doesn't make sense. Chazal say Meiso Machamas Malacha, and both Svaras are Machamas Malacha. And why would it make a difference whether it's B'Shas Malacha or not? So before we come to the Rambam, let us further understand the Ramban and the Rashba. And surprisingly, besides the two opinions of the great Rishonim, Ramban and Rashba, we have two additional svaras from the Achronim, which is somewhat of a surprise, because usually the Achronim just share with us their understanding in the Rishonim. Machla Ephraim and the Goen have two novel approaches and explaining in a different way the Ptur of Mesa Machmes Malacha. So the Ramban is quoted by many poskim, and in our Siman, Shiur Mem, Sma Sif Koten Gimel, Shach Sif Koten Hey, echo the sword of the Ramban. The Mashil is the one that was negligent. You know your animal, you know your kli, you know your car, and you should have made me aware that this is a weak animal, it's a sick animal, and therefore it is your responsibility if it broke down. And even a shoyel is chayev ba'oinsin, but he's not chayev al pshias hamashil. That is the Ramban, quoted by the Sma and the Shach and many other poskim. Comes along Bir Agra. The Ramo, and the source of the Ramo is the Mordechai, Bava Metzia Shein Ayin Aleph. The Ramo deals with Chiev Oinsim, Shoyel Chayev Ba'oinsim. However, if the oinus is machmas mashil and not machmas shoyel, shoyel potor. Shoyel chayiv ba'oinsin only when the oinus was brought about by the shoyel. It's an oines. It's not something you could prevent, but he brought it. He brought about the oinus. So the Ramo quotes an interesting shaila in the name of the Mordechai. A Jew took a loan from a guy, and he gave him a mashkin. And the mashkin is worth far more than the money he borrowed. So Reuven gave a mashkin to a guy and borrowed money. Shimon wants to borrow money from that same guy. Reuven tells Shimon, the guy has a mashkin and is worth more than the money I took, so I don't mind if you borrow money from that same guy and give him a lien on my mashkin. And then the guy's house burned down and the mashkin was burned and it was lost. 158? And that is on page 158 of our Kuntras. השואל מחבר בהמה מטלטל וננסו ביודו כגון שמייסו איניש בוריניש בחייב ודווקא שאינה הוא אינס מחמס השואל אבל אם אירה הוא אינס מחמס המשיל פוטו ולכן מי שיש לו משכן אצל גוי והשאיר לו חבר לככל אבויד מועס וניסף המשכן פוטו לשואל תו בלאו אחי הויו ניסרף מכויח המשיל. The shoyel didn't touch that mashkin. He never even saw it. He is a shoyel because he used that mashkin to borrow money. But he never touched it. He never took it into his possession. So it would be destroyed machmes amashil, and it has nothing to do with the shoyel, and therefore, poter min sin. So the Mordechai is mechadish, and the Ramo paskins that chiddush. Shoyel Chai ba'oinsin, only if the oinsin came to be Machamas HaShoyel. Machamas HaShoyel doesn't mean that he bears direct responsibility, but it happened in his possession. It might not have happened if it wouldn't be in his possession. But by the mashkin, he never touched it. The mashkin is exactly where the mashil put it, and therefore the soinus is not machmas hashoyel and his poto. Says the Gon. Let's have a look once again, page 158. That is the svara of Mesa Machmes Malacha. If it's Mesa Machmes Malacha, not Machmes Shoyel. Do we have the Biragano?
159. Next.
Okay.
Ois Gimel. Ois Gimel.
V'zatam the Mesa Machmes Malacha Potor.
Gimel.
Ois Gimel, page 159. Ayin Shach, Sif Cotton, Hey. So why is the Gra mitzayin the Shach Sif Cotton Hey? The Shach Sif Cotton Hey brings the Ramban. Does he mean to say I disagree with the Ramban? Does he mean to impose on the Ramban his Savora, which would be very unreasonable? The Mordechai is a Chiddush, has nothing to do with the Ramban. But the Goen comes up with a new Svora Mesa Machmas Malocha. It is not the Machmas HaShoyel. So there are two questions we ask. If we have the Ramban and the Rashba, why do we need to look for number 3? Wouldn't number 1 and 2 be enough? And this is not very common by the Goen. Many people don't understand the Derech HaLimed of the Goen. And they mistakenly say that the Goen is choylek al Rishonim, which is not true. Anybody boki b'toyres a Goen. The Goen sees the Rishonim as his peers, and he has no problem siding with the Rambam against the Ramban or the Ramban against the Rambam, but it is very uncommon that the Goen is choylek al Rishonim medated and avshei. And it's a chiddush that the Goen would suggest understanding number 3 when all we have is the Ramban and the Rashba. And it is also difficult to understand because Mesa Machmas Malachi usually is Machamas HaShoyel. It is always Machmas HaShoyel because he is the one that's using it. So what does this have to do with the Mordechai and the Ramah by the Mashkin, which is an Oines Machmes HaMashil, because the Shoyel had nothing to do with that Mashkin. He borrowed money on that Mashkin, but not more than that. So that's the Goen. Number 4 is Machne Ephraim. And the Machne Ephraim is also a Gevaldige Chiddush, Shel Cheshale Simen Daled, says the Machne Ephraim. When a person borrows an object, a shoyel, and it breaks down machmas malacha, it's a shala betos. And like a mekach toas is bottle, like kedusha toas is bottle, shala betos is bottle, and therefore he has a din of a shoy machinam, who is potem in a oinsim. That is the Machne Ephraim, and it's a gevaldige chiddush. At the bottom of the page, 423. What's my problem with the Machne Ephraim? First of all, hashkafa-wise. Once again, we have the Ramban and the Rashba. Why come up with number 4? Maybe number 3, because the Machne Ephraim was older than the Goen. So in chronological order, the Goen is number 4, Machne Ephraim number 3. Why? But besides the point, Mekach Tos is only when it becomes obvious that there was something that the Lokeach or the Mekadesh or whoever it is, there was something he wasn't aware of b'shas hakinyan, but nothing that happens achar hakinyan would render the kinyan void. That is not Mekach Tos. Person bought an animal, he bought a horse. And the first time he got up in the saddle, the horse dropped dead. Would we say it's a Mekach Tos? I would never buy a dead horse. That's not a Mekach Tos. You need to prove that this horse was sick when you bought it. Every horse will die someday. It's just your bad luck that it died right after you bought it. That's not a Mekach Tos. Even though it is clear If he would have known in advance that the horse is going to die an hour later, he wouldn't have bought it. That's not a mekech tos. That's your bad luck. Mekech tos is only if this horse was sick, it was ill, it was broken, and I didn't know. So Meisa Machmis Malacha, why would that be a mekech tos? Unless we go back to the Ramban and we assume that it was broken, but even the Ramban wouldn't go to the extent and say it's a mekach tos. All the Ramban says, the animal had some deficiency, you should have shared it with me. You should have told me to be careful. But this is not enough knowledge to say mekach tos. To be mevatla mekach, you need to know 100% that there was something I should have known and I didn't know. And by Meisa Machmas Malacha, we don't have that level. And therefore, the Gon and the Machna Ephraim are both Gevaldige Chedushim, and we come back, Ein Lanu Elo Divrei HaRishonim, the Ramban and the Rashba, and those are the two major opinions that all the other Achronim and the Beis Yosef and the Ramo deal with. Mukeshchin was something b'shas kedushin or b'shas kinyan. You ask a very good question, which I cannot answer, but I just could give you a vague idea what the answer would be. Mekach tos is one din, umdana is an other. And we do find several places in Shas the concept of a umdana. And a umdana would sometimes say even something that happened after the kinyan would be enough to be mevatel the kinyan. And there are a few examples in the Gemara, in Kedushin and in Ksubis. Person sold all his possessions, adate lemesak la'aradi Yisrael. He planned to move to Israel, and therefore he sold his furniture, he sold his house. And at the end of the day, for some reason, he cannot move to Eretz Yisrael. He could retract the kinyonim. Because it is so obvious that that was the reason he sold, and it is as if he made a tanai. So I can't go into the details because that's a totally different sugya, a sugya of mekach or memkar. But fundamentally, every mekach tos is only if there was a tos beikar hamekach, there was a tos beikar hakedushin. Meisa machmas malacha doesn't even come close to that level. We don't know for certainty that this animal was flawed, that the machine was flawed, that the car was flawed. Maybe it just broke down. And this happens all the time. Every animal dies sometime, and every person will some stage give back his neshama to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, I once again say, the Gon of the Machafar Machedushim Gedolim, and we stick with the Ramban and the Rashba. The Ramban only comes to explain the halacha of Meisa Machmis Malacha. What is the logic? The logic is that Torah assumes, probably, but it is only probably, the Mashil was aware that he has a problem, and that is why it's a din Torah, Chazal HaMachadish, Meisa Machmis Malacha, Potor. I think the way to explain the Ramban is, the entire concept that a shoylas chayav ba'insin is a chidush, ve'en lecho boya lechidushoi. But if the oinus is in the course of normal usage, potur, and the reasoning is, we assume, even though there is no vados, and therefore there's no room to argue mekach tos, but it is an assumption that probably the mashil was aware, should have been aware, and should have made the shoyel aware that this might happen. But it's an assumption. It's not mekach tos or shala betos. So, and now there's an additional chiddush in the entire sugya of Mesa Machmas Malacha, and that is the Shulchan Aruch, which brings the Machlokes Machaber and the Ramah, listim v'chayos. A person borrowed an animal, and he went on his way, and he went into the forest. Animals befell him, bears or wolves, and they killed the horse, they killed the cow, they killed the mule, or listim, robbers and burglars. Is that Mesa Machmas Malacha or not? The Torah brings two opinions. According to the Ramas, Mesa Machmas Malacha Pota, and that's the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch. The Rosh says it's not Mesa Machmas Malacha, Chayev, and that is the opinion of the Ramah. Why yes and why no? The Rosh argues, was it a difference than any oinus? The Ramah says, because it happened in the course, I took the animal and I took it where I needed to take it, and that is Mesa Machmas Malacha. The Ramah says, makes no difference whether the horse broke down when I sat on its back or when I was on the way taking it to where I want to sit on its back. There's no difference whether the oxen broke down plowing or on the way to the field that I intended to plow. It's all Mesa Machmas Malacha. And the Rosh says, no, this is Oines. It might have happened back there as well. So that's a Machlokes, Rosh and Ramah. Would we once again say,
Questions from the floor.
it is B'Shas Malacha, but all these Rishonim disagree with the Rambam. So the question, according to the Rambam, maybe you would be Potter, because maybe that would be defined B'Shas Malacha, but that is not the Machlokes. The Machlokes is, how far do we take Mesa Machmas Malacha? Must it be certain that it's Mesa Machmas Malacha? Or it would be enough, maybe it's Mesa Machmas Malacha, maybe it would happen anywhere, and then it would be a din of an oinus, or do we assume it happened here, and therefore it's Mesa Machmas Malacha? So there are two approaches to explain Shittas HaRamah. And Shittas HaRamah is the opinion that needs more explanation. The opinion that says this is defined as Mesa Machmas Malacha, because L'chayra the Rosh is right. Who says it's Machmas Malacha? Animals could be anywhere. Thieves and burglars and robbers could be anywhere. Who says this is Mesa Machmas Malacha? The Beis Yosef explains, he took it out of the city, and that is the case of the Machlokes. Usually burglars are not in the city. Did you ever hear of a person named Robin Hood? Maybe some of you might have encountered him sometime. He wasn't American, I think he was British, and he used to lurk in the forests to rob the rich and give the money to the poor. So Robin Hood never came into the town. He was always waiting in the forest. So the Beis Yosef says, the burglars and the animals are in the forest, not in the city, and that's why it's Mesa Machmas Malacha. It is only because you took it out there. So this is somewhat of an Ipcha Mistavra. If it would be in the city, he would be Chayev, because that's an oinus. Because I took it out of the city, and I put it into danger, Potor, because then it would be Mesa Machmas Malacha. The Nesivis, the one speaking, there are so many people here. Raise your hand, I should be able to see. Okay? I don't think that makes a difference. That is not the defining factor. I don't know. So the Nesivis has a similar hesber, but slightly different. If it would happen in the city, you would scream, you would yell, and people would rush to help you. But you took it out of town, and there was no one there to help you. So these are the two approaches explaining the shit of the Ramah, why it would be defined as Mesa Machmas Malacha. It's not an oinus that could happen anywhere. No, in the city it wouldn't happen. Either because those that cause the damage are not in the city, only in the forest, or because in the city there would be many people to help you. But you took them out of the city, you took them in the forest. And that is why it's Mesa Machmas Halacha. So what? Because today's Shiur is supposed to be Halacha L'Maisa. Person borrowed a car. He parked the car, and there was a car accident. Totally not his responsibility. He parked the car in a place that was legitimate. And then somebody banged into his car and caused damage. Is that Mesa Machmas Malacha? Or it's Einsin, and a shoyel is chayev ba'Einsin? Would that be dependent on the machlokes, the Ramah and the Rosh, the Mechaber and the Ramah? Would it be different than I borrowed an animal, and the wolves killed the animal? So the other person driving his car, would he be like a robber or an animal, a wolf? Would that be Mesa Machmas Malacha? According to both the Beis Yosef and the Nesivis, no, this would be an oinus. Because Mesa Machmas Malacha is only if I took it somewhere, and what happened because it was there. If it would be elsewhere, it wouldn't happen. But an accident could happen anywhere. Lulei Divreim, I would say, according to the Ramah, Mesa Machmas Malacha is enough if we assume maybe it's Mesa Machmas Malacha, and the animals were there. The burglars were there. Probably they weren't elsewhere, and that is why it's Mesa Machmas Malacha. And in that case, the story with the car would be Mesa Machmas Malacha. But there still is room to argue. According to the Rambam, that definitely would not be Mesa Machmas Malacha because I parked the car. So how do we define Malacha? Lechaoira Mesa Machmas Malacha is only when I am using what I borrowed. The moment I parked the car, that's not Mesa Machmas Malacha. That would be like any other oinus. And maybe the machlokes Ramah and Rosh is only when I was with that animal, steering the animal, riding on the animal, schlepping the animal. I was engaged, and that is part of the malacha. But the moment I park the car, that is no longer machmas malacha. And therefore, my opinion would be this is like any other oines and shoyel chayev ba'Einsin. That cannot be defined as malacha. It is true that the shore needs a break, but that would be to the benefit of the shoyel. It's not Mesa Machmas Malacha. So according to the Rambam, I definitely would say it's not Shas Malacha. Even according to the others, it would not be defined as Machmas Malacha. And now I want to go over about 10 Shailas Halacha L'Maisa and try to deal. So I will quote some tshuvas of Achronim and then some Shailas I dealt with that are not discussed in Achronim. Halacha L'Maisa, we'll try to answer some of these questions. First of all, in the Gemara, Daf Tzadik Zayin Amud Aleph, there are two somewhat weird stories. Person had too many mice in his house. His house was infested with mice. Once upon a time, you bought a cat. So he borrowed a cat. He didn't buy one. The cat should solve his problem. Obviously, that was before the days of Reb Shaya Lemekere, and therefore the only solution to a problem of mice would be a cat. Zecher Tzadik v'Kodesh Levrocha. I did in no way did I mean to say anything cynical. Just a little milsa de b'dichos while we're learning. So this cat was somewhat of a timid cat, and those were very aggressive and courageous mice. And the mice saw this intruder, and they planned an attack, and they bound it together, and they killed the cat. And the Gemara asks, would that be Mesa Machmes Malacha, or would it be like any crazy oines and Shoyalas Chayev Ba'oinsin? And the Gemara gives a moshel, Gavre de Noshe Katle, would he deserve any compensation? And then the Gemara asks, second question, somewhat similar to the first, a cat and a mice. And that cat was overly aggressive, or he had a great appetite, and he ate so many mice that he died from obesity. Don't know exactly what caused him to die. He ate too many mice, and he died. Would that be considered Meisa Machmas Malacha? And the Gemara says the same moshel, even though the moshel is more relevant to question number 1 than question number 2. Because in the second case, it's not the mice that killed the cat. He just killed too many mice. He was too successful. So the Rama in Siman Shin Mem paskins, based on the Gemara, that if a person borrowed a cat to kill mice and the mice killed the cat, that is Meisa Machmas Malacha, and he's potter. And he doesn't relate to question number 2. But in question number 1, he writes, V'chein kol ki yoytze boi. And it's a machloikis and achroinim. Is he intentionally omitting question number 2, and that would not be Meisa Machmas Malacha? Or when he writes Kein kol ki yoytze boi, that means question number 2. Where is that?
Ramah?
Yeah, the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. And Shin Mem,
So men,
422.
420, no, it's not there, it's in the, actually,
Yes. 422 at the bottom of the page. 22, 23. So the Ramah brings, first of all, the Machloikis, Machaber, the 2 opinions, the Rosh and the Ramah, the Machaber and the Ramah. Hamash shel hachaveroi shunra, lirdoif achbarim, v'achlu ha'achbarim, mikra machmas malacha, the bola oines machmas malacha, v'chol ki yoytze bezeh. So what does he mean? Kol ki yoytze bezeh. Does that include the second question? Most of the Achronim say yes, but some say no. Lecha oira, the svara would be the same. I think it is even more mistaver when the cat ate too much. That would be machmas malacha, because the cat did exactly what he was expected to do: kill mice and eat them. In the first case, it would be more reasonable to say it's an oinus. And if there are more paskins in the first case, it's machmas malacha lecha oira. Kal v'chomer, question number 2. Shalas Shuvas Marash HaLevi, one of the Choshev Achronim going back 400 years, Choshev Mishpat Simalamed Hei, tells a story. Person made a chasana. And the chasana planner and the mechutin rented a place, or maybe it was in his own personal private home, and he borrowed a chandelier, a beautiful piece of crystal, and he hung it on a beam. And the beam broke, chandelier fell, and it was destroyed. Would that be Mesa Machmas Malacha? And he says,
222.
yes, 222, but I would not just, it's more important when we learn Rishonim to observe their Lashon, but just if anybody does want to go through this tshuva, 222, Tshuvas Marash HaLevi. And he says, even according to the Ramban, it's a heavy chandelier, so you should have told the borrower, be careful where you hang this up. And therefore it's Mesa Machmas Malacha. La'anias daiti tzurech iyun. And I want to share with you a Yesod Godol. Mesa Machmas Malacha deals with oines. And all our questions, the Mesa Machmas Malacha is it an oines or Mesa Machmas Maloches Potor Afal Pi Sheshoyel Chayev Ba'oinsen. But Mesa Machmas Malocha never patters a Poisheya. There is no ptur of Mesa Machmas Malocha to pater a Poisheya. The entire concept of Mesa Machmas Malocha, what's the Chiddush? Afal Pi Shehu Oines and Hashoyel Chayev Ba'oinsen. Mesa Machmas Malocha is an exception of Oinsim. But even if we assume that the Rosh is right, the Mashil should have told the Shoyel, Savi, be careful where you're going to hang it. But I think the Shoyel himself bears far more responsibility. You hung it. You saw how heavy it is. The Mashil doesn't know on what type of beam you're going to hang this. But if you take a 500-pound chandelier and you hang it on the schach of your sukkah, then you are reckless. You're irresponsible. So I argue, even according to the Ramban, that Mesa Machmas Malocha is potter because the Mashil should have told you this is a sick animal. But if you borrow a chandelier and you are the one that hung it on a beam, you bear greater responsibility than the Mashil. There would be no ptur of Mesa Machmas Malocha. This is not an oinus. So, even according to the Ramban, that the reason Mesa Machmas Malocha is potter because the Mashal should have told you that is when the shoyel is a total oinus. I borrowed an animal. How would I know that this is different than any other animal? I borrowed a car. I didn't know there's a problem with the carburetor or the engine, or does every car have a carburetor? I have no idea. I don't drive cars. But I think there's something called a carburetor. Maybe in electric cars there is no, I don't know. But anyway, but you're the one that took the chandelier and you hung it on a beam. Your responsibility is far greater than the marshal's responsibility, and therefore, Lani is daiti, I would not pater machmas Mesa Machmas Malacha. Even if it was there a few days without a problem. So why would the mashal bear responsibility? Sometimes weight causes a beam to be in stress, and not always will it break immediately. Sometimes it'll take a few days till it'll break down. But I still argue, if I would live 400 years ago, I need to always make this apology. I would say, Chayev ba'oinsen. You're the one that hung it on the beam. You're the one that uses this. And you should have checked or asked whether this beam could carry this weight. The fact that it took a few days to break down is not relevant. Shalas Teshuvas Yehuda Yala. Rabbi Yehuda asked, if he hung it up properly, then once again, then even according to the Ramban, why would the mashal bear responsibility? If we assume that the beam could carry this weight, then according to the Ramban, which is the Ikar Halacha, there would be no ptur of Mesa Machmas Malocha. So Marash Levi bases his psak on the Ramban, and I say, where the responsibility of the shoyel is greater than the responsibility of the mashal, there should be no ptur of Mesa Machmas Malocha. Shalas Teshuvas Yehuda Yala, it's not the very famous one of the greatest Rabbanim in Hungary, Rabbi Yehuda Asad, but rather one of the Golim in Saloniki, Rabbi Yehuda Kobo. And he has a tshuva, which once again deals with cats and mice, but a different story. Person had too many mice, and he borrowed a mouse trap. And like many mouse traps, you use cheese to lure the mice into the trap and then catch them. But he also had a cat in his house, and he should have been aware that cats like cheese as well, and not only mice. So the cat got stuck in the trap, and a cat is somewhat bigger than a mouse, and the trap broke to pieces when it snapped down on the cat. And the question was, is that Mesa Machmas Malacha and is Potter Meleshalem? And the Yehudi Yala, Rabbi Yehuda Kobo, says, the Mashil should have told the Shoyel, if you have a cat in your house, then don't use this trap. And here I ask even more powerfully than the B'Marash Levi. The Mashil should have told the Shoyel, if you have a cat, don't use this trap. He also should have told the Shoyel, if you have an elephant in your house, and you might step on this trap, then it's not kedai to use this trap. But the Shoyel knew that he has a cat in the house, which the Mashal did not know. So I think the responsibility bearing on the Shoyel for breaking this trap is far greater than the responsibility on the Mashal, and therefore I would say this is not Mesa Machmes Malacha. I think you need to give it. Yeah, that is actually the question of the Ramban, and I think the answer would be very poshut. You need to give instructions when they are reasonable. So if a person borrows a mule, and you know why people borrow mules. A mule is an animal that has very strong legs and a strong back, and mules are transfer animals. Horses are borrowed to ride on. Oxen are borrowed to plow the fields. So the mashal bears responsibility to give instructions if he knows that this animal is somewhat a shvacha animal. So the mashal needs to give instructions to the shoyel how to catch mice. But the mashal doesn't need to think and say, if you have a cat, don't use this. This is common sense. And the mashal, why should he think that the shoyel has a cat? But the shoyel has a cat at home. So it would be his responsibility to know, if you have a cat in your house, you know that cats like milk. They like cheese. And this is not big enough to catch cats. And you don't want your cat to be caught in this trap. And therefore I think it is only by an oinus that Mesa Machmes Malacha is potter, but not by Poisheya. Shara Melech, Hilches Choyvel Amazik, a woman borrowed a fleishige pot, and she was aware that it's a fleishige pot. And she cooked fleishigs, and by mistake she took a milchige spoon and she stirred the pot. And the pot was nesar bosa b'cholov. And it's a kli cheres she'ein lo hechsho. And the pot needs to be thrown away. Shara Melech says it's Mesa Machmes Malacha. And once again I say, this is a pshia. You knew the pot is fleishig. You cooked fleishigs and you stirred with a milchige spoon. That shouldn't have happened. And when there's a pshia mitzad the shoyel, there is no ptur of Mesa Machmes Malacha. And bechavona I am insada the shailes mekal mekaved elakal. And as we move forward, the questions have become more and more obvious that this is a pshia mitzad hashoyel. So it's a question. Why is it a pshia? I think when we deal with the din of Mesa Machmes Malacha, and I say pshia, it doesn't need to be a pshia gemuro. The question was, whose pshia is greater, the mashal or the shoyel? So in this case of the pot, the mashal didn't need to say anything. It was, you borrowed a fleishige pot. And I think anybody that borrows a pot should inquire, what type of pot do you want, fleishig or milchig? So anyway, I think when the level of pshia of the shoyel is far greater than the achrayas ala mashil, there would be no ptur of meisep machmis maloch. Tzois achoshen, shin mem aleph, deals with a person that invested money. And I need to make this clear. It's not a iska, and it's not a halavoah. I am investing money for you, and I'm doing you a favor, and the money was lost. Solach ha'oira is totally a shoy machinam. If I have no profit, then I bear no responsibility. Only pshia. But if we do have a heter iska, and it's a loan, and it's a business, and I also make a benefit, then that would be a din of a shoyel, and he invested the money, and the money was lost. And the Ktsoy says, Mesa machmis malacha. And Mesa machmis malacha is potter because investments go ori, even the best investor, smartest investor, loses money. No one can give a guarantee. But lachoyre, this is malva v'loiva and not mashil v'shoyel. And by loiva, we do not find a ptur of mesa machmas malacha. Milve lohoitzoa nitno. And when I borrow money, it is mine. But maybe by iska, which is machza milva and machatza pekodoin, that would be more similar to shoyel v'tzorach in whether the entire concept of ma'isa machmas malacha is relevant. Nided afnun ches amud aleph. When a woman borrows a garment, and the garment was tarnished with dam nidus, the borrower needs to clean the beged and give it back cleaned. Kaved kushaisa. I don't know whether everybody is familiar with the Sefer. One of the greatest Gedolim in Poland was the Chelkas Yoav. His name was Reb Yoav Yoshua Weingarten, Talmud of the Avnei Nezer. He was the Rav in a town named Kinsk in Poland, Gewaldige Ilui. And he wrote a Sefer Kabed de Kushaisa, which is 103 kashas. Gematria Kabo, Kuv Beis Aleph, kashas without terutzim. Not because he didn't have terutzim. He said this is a gift he gives to young Bnei Torah in Poland to stimulate their thought. Lahagdil Torah ulahadira, lechadudei. And Kashel Amites, in Kabed Ukashai, he asks, why is that not Mesa Machmis Malacha? It is in the normal course when a woman wears a garment, sometimes it is stained. And why is it not Mesa Machmis Malacha? Well, according to the Ramban, the Mashal bears no responsibility whatsoever. According to the Rashba, maybe there would be a ptur of Mesa Machmis Malacha, because the Rashba says, it is to be expected, it is common, if you want me to bear responsibility, you should have stipulated, and you didn't. But I don't think this has anything to do with DNA Shoimrim. The reason she needs to clean this beged is not DNA Shoimrim at all. What is it? The Nesivis, in our Siman, Shin Mem, the Nesivis maintains, in Siv Kotten Gimel, it's Medina Mazik. I don't think it's Mazik. Lididi, it is just Adate Dehochi. When a person borrows eating utensils, I'm making a simcha. Could you have some nice cutlery to borrow me for the evening? And your neighbor borrows you spoons and forks and knives and plates and bowls. Do you give them back dirty? Or wouldn't everybody understand you got them clean, give them back clean? It is your responsibility to clean those kelim before you give them back. That is not Medina Mazik. Neither is it Medinei Shoimrim. It is Al Menas Kain. Anan Sahadi, you give something back the way you got it. You borrowed a clean garment, clean it, and give it back clean. When a Kala borrows a Kala dress, who bears responsibility for cleaning that dress after the chasana? Isn't it the Kala? So the Chelkes Yoyev assumes Mali Kotla Kula, Mali Kotla Palga. And if there's a Ptur, Mesa Machmes Malacha, when the Kli breaks down entirely, the same Ptur would be relevant if it breaks down halfway. So Mesa Machmes Malacha, what is it then if an animal gets a broken back, but we take it to the vet and it'll cost $500 to treat the animal? Wouldn't that be the same din of Mesa Machmes Malacha? It would. And that would be the same shaila. If it would be a kli matris, it would be the same shaila. Yeah. And there, that is another reason I disagree with the Chelkes Yoyev. It's not dinei shomerim. It has nothing to do with Mesa Machmes Malacha. Neither is it medinei mazik. It is anan sahadi. Almanas kain. Some things don't need to be stipulated. You need to give an object back the way you got it. And goes without saying, you got a clean garment, you give back a clean garment. And therefore, the expense of cleaning the garment is upon the lender. One more interesting source. Sefer Toldos Sodom is the biography of Reb Zalmana, the brother of Reb Chaim Evolozhin. So Reb Chaim Evolozhin was probably the greatest Talmud of the Gro. The Gro had many, many great Talmidim, but he is the most prominent. And in a way, he is Doile V'Mashka. And Nefesh HaChaim is considered the manifesto of the Vilna Gaon. His Ashkofa, his Yesoides, his Torah. But he had a brother, Reb Zalmana. We have no Torah of Reb Zalmana, to the best of my knowledge. But he was known as to be a tremendous Ilui. Sefer Toldos Sodom is his biography. And a story is told. Reb Zalmana pleaded with Reb Ber, his friend, lend me a Sefer Torah de Be'eliyahu. Because Reb Zalmana wanted to learn Torah de Be'eliyahu. I don't know where everybody knows what is Torah de Be'eliyahu. It's Divrei Torah de Eliyahu Novi taught Rav Onon Kemavor B'Ksubis Daf Kuf Vav Omed Aleph. And Reb Ber said, I have one, and it's very precious to me. So please watch over it. A week later, he gave it back torn and worn. Nothing to be recognized. And Reb Ber was very angry. And he said, you know how precious this is to me. Why didn't you watch over it? And Reb Zalmana said, all I did was learn. I did nothing but learn. But the way he learned, and Reb Zalmana argued, Mesa Machmes Malacha. That's the story. Toldos Sodom is not a sefer of psak. We don't know, did they go to Beis Din? I don't know. So we don't know what the psak was. But the story is just told to tell the gadlus of Reb Zalmana. In 1 week, he learned what a Talmud Vosek learns in 100 years. Not exactly in the most positive way, but in Yerushalmi and Broches, a young Talmud Chochem, Rav Bun, passed away when he was 28 years old. And in the Hesped, they said, Shona Rav Bun, b'chof ches shenoisav, mashe Talmud Vosek, shoyne b'mei shonim. So Reb Zalmana had the Torah de Be'eliyahu a week, and it looked like it was learned 100 years. And Reb Ber said, you need to give me compensation. Reb Zalmana said, Mesa Machmes Malacha. So in Bava Mitzvah Daf Chof Tes, Ashol Sefer Torah Machaveiroi, it is very limited what he could do with that Sefer Torah. Lo yilmed bo b'tchilo, only Chazorah, not Iyun. And you cannot learn together with anyone else, only yourself. Kosav Ramban, and the same as in Shuvas Harad Baz, Tov, Kuf, Chof, Bezman Hazeh. If you borrow a sefer, you could learn Iyun, Bekiyas, anything, and that is Minhag Olam. So L'choyer Reb Zalmana would be right, but I don't think so. kederech ha'olam. If you borrow a sefer, and especially you knew that the lender told you, watch over it. It's precious to me. It's the only one I have. The din Torah would come to me, I would be machayivim. That is not Meisa Machmas Malacha. And the HaRav, Minchas Elazar Chelik Dalet Simen Ayin, brings the story, and he says, I would paskin that is chayiv l'shalem. There is no ptur of Meisa Machmas Malacha. Is that because the HaRav was a Hasidic Rebbe, and therefore he didn't like a literature story? I don't know. I am a Hasidic person. I also think I would be machayev, because be careful when you learn. And maybe the bear should have taken into account that the Bezelmele learns, he's going to lose all his senses and learn with the Gavaldig Yeslavis. The story is also quoted by the Shoyel HaMeshiv, Madura Gimel, Chelik Beis, Simen Kuf Ayin Hey, but the Shoyel HaMeshiv doesn't give a psak, doesn't give a definitive psak. Two questions I was dealing with. A person borrowed an apartment for Shabbos, and his friend Simcha Rabba let him use the apartment. Friday night, thieves tried to break in, and they were unsuccessful, but they broke the lock. They tried to push keys and to turn it, and they broke the lock. Does he need to pay for that lock? So HaRav said, he was mafalpel. Is this Meisa Machmas Malacha or not? Or is it like any other oinus and a shoyel is chayiv? But the Rav overlooked the fact that shtoras, avodim, vekarkois, there is no chayiv shoymerim at all. And a bias, mechubel karka, has a din of karkois. The lock is part of the door is part of the house, so there would be no chiyuv mitzad dinay shoymerim at all, and therefore the question would not be whether it's an oinus or Meisa Machmas Malach. Person borrowed a computer, and when he put in his disk on key, it had a virus, and he destroyed the software of the computer. Does he need to pay? So there was no proper antivirus. Would the marshal be responsible? He should have told the shoyel, be careful what you put in because I don't have any antivirus system. Or the shoyel bears responsibility. You don't put in a disk or a disk on key unless you check that it has no virus. What? So, who bears responsibility? On one hand, he used the computer like everybody uses a computer. Would that be Meisa Machmas Malacha? Why is he the mazik? Because he put in the antivirus, he put in his disk.
So why not a matzah be dying?
Why wouldn't it be a mazik? Why he would be?
Unless his matzah
Yeah.
dying, not making a chance.
Yes. So I really think, once again, it's not DNA shoymrim, it's DNA nazikin. So some argue that it's a hezek she'enoi nikar. I think that is a hezek nikar. Hezek she'enoi nikar is tuma v'tahara. You see nothing. But this is the way you use a computer. And when you put on that computer and you want to use it and the systems don't work, it's din and nazikin. It's a hezek hanikar. Some argue it's a groma ben azikin, and I think it's a mazik biyadayim and not a groma ben azikin. And if we're dealing with din and azikin, adam muad li'olam, bein shoygig, bein mezid, bein oinis, bein rotzoin, and therefore my psak was chayiv medina nazikin and not at all medina shoymim. Sarah Melech's case, it would be Hezek Shein Nika, but Medina Shoimrim, there is no ptur of Hezek Shein Nika. Hezek Shein Nika is a din in Dinei Nazikin and Dinei Mazik. So I shared with you many Shailas Halacha Lamaisa that came out in the Poiskim, and we started off today's Shiur with a fundamental understanding of the ptur of Meisa Machmas Malacha. We did not discuss the Rambam, and I think our time is more than up. But I have a gewaltige Chiddush, bebiur divrei Rambam. I doubt I'll come back to a third shiur. So all I could recommend is Minchas Rosh Chelik Beis and Kuf Yud Ches. There's Shalosh Teshuvos, Minchas Rosh Chelik Beis, Kuf Yud Ches. There's a gewaldige Mahalach.
Or on Sunday, Mitzvah Shem, on Sunday.
And, maybe next Sunday? Maybe. So we're going to have a big crowd at the Sunday shiur. So, but that'll be another opportunity. Yasher Koyach, once again, it's a pleasure to come twice. Yagdil Torah v'yadi, we should all be zoicha for many years to come. L'shtashea v'lahadia b'divrei Torah.